How's everybody doing? Good first week so far, hopefully? Awesome. Alrighty, so I am going to, for the next week or three, depending on my horrible memory, call roll. And if I butcher your name, please correct me. I know all the little tricks and tips for how you should have memory and remember names, and none of them work for me. I don't know why. My brain is just like, maybe I have low-grade prosopagnosia. I don't know. But it will take me a while to learn your names, and I apologize in advance. At some point in the semester, I will mix up two people who look nothing alike. And I apologize for that in advance. Just sort of like bear with me as I take roll the next couple of weeks. All right, so Kate, Ayer, and I haven't checked. There might be some people who dropped. All right, Justin Branch. Let's see here. All right, no, Kylie is not here. Oh, you're here today, yay! Okay, cool. And Nora, I saw. Janaya, she also may have dropped. Catherine Dittmer. Okay. I thought Caitlin was on Zoom. Destiny, I saw come in. And if I know people saying it's just because I've had them. So, all right, and Lauren, thank you. All right, and I saw Ayana is on Zoom. Cameron, awesome. And Whitney, awesome. And then I just saw Jay come in. Avery, awesome. And Sadie. Allie, I saw. Yeah. Sarah. Thanks. Oh, Sarah Brosner. And then Sarah Richard. Y'all are actually right next to each other. All right, Haley. There you are. And Trinity. All right, Daryl. You don't see. Jenna, I did see. Connor. Yep. And then Grayson. Awesome. And Gabrielle. Do you prefer Gabrielle or Gabby? Gabrielle. Perfect. Awesome. So again, I'll do that the first couple weeks. I'm just realizing I know over half of you, so hopefully I can learn the new names pretty quickly. But again, let's not count on Dr. Meyer's brain to do that. I wanted to take just a couple more minutes today to familiarize you with our Blackboard page, just because there's lots of really important stuff on there that will help you out. I'm going to go ahead and dive into the student preview so that you all will see this the way it'll come up on your computers. So information and syllabus is just the syllabus. At a couple points during the semester, we'll do a little warm-up activity just to sort of like get us thinking, get our brains going. So those will be there. I put this up this morning. It's a link to the Google Slides I'll be using. I usually don't update them that much from the PowerPoints that are posted, but just in case you prefer that, you should be able to view all of them with that link. It's going to be a little slow because the computer's also tired. But there's also actual PowerPoints of each lecture if you want to download those and take notes on your computer. Or if you're someone who prefers to print them out, there are PDFs that are notes pages. So basically, you can print these out and write notes next to them. You can see I've been teaching this class since 2010. Exams will be here throughout the semester. There's an example of the essay questions here from a couple of years back. I got the students' permission to post it if anyone wants to kind of look at that. I have some videos I'll show through here throughout the semester. Here is where I will post our playlist. If you want to go back and look at the fall 22 ones, you can see how different or not I am now. And then all the stuff for our simulation will be here when we get there at the end of the semester. There is also an honor subsection. Right now I have one student in it, but all the stuff there has its own thing. The Zoom info is here if you do have to join via Zoom. My info is here. If you're like, wait, where's Dr. Myers' Calendly link? I don't know. I have some stuff on here about participation as well. This is from a workshop we did a few years ago as faculty, and I thought it was really helpful. This is from the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities, who do have a presence on our campus. And so they talk about having one speaker at a time, using I statements. So I feel or I think if someone says something not so great. Maintaining confidentiality. You know, we're going to talk about stuff that might be personal in here because we're going to be talking about personality. That's pretty personal. So just ask that you don't go like blabbing it all over campus to everybody else. Practice purity of motive. So if someone says something that sounds ignorant or mean, practice thinking, why might they think this way? So this is something I challenge myself with a lot with like anti-science folks, so like anti-vax people. I have to challenge myself, like, why might they think this way, right? They have a certain set of information, right? And that information isn't scientifically correct, but that's what they're learning. I will always try to do the ouch then educate if I can. So if someone does say something that's incorrect or even offensive, I'll try to be like the one who says, ooh, let's rethink about that and let me tell you the science. Sharing the error and then taking responsibility for how you say it. And things along those lines. Any announcements I post will be here. I'm just realizing I should clear out the ones from a couple years ago, so I'll go through and do that later today. All right, any questions about where to find anything on Blackboard? Yeah.
So I was looking the other day, where does it say like which chapters and everything to read?
On the syllabus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good question. So if you go to the syllabus, and then you go to the very last page. And then if anyone needs an extra copy of the syllabus, I have a few up here. So feel free to grab one after class. And this will tell you like what we're reading for that day. And then the assignments are mostly what we'll do in class.
So the Thunder, is that both books or just one?
Good question. So if you look up here, Thunder refers to the main text, which is the personality puzzle. And then if there's just an author name like McAdams, that is the chapter or reading in the Pieces book by the author McAdams. Yeah, good question. And if you ever have any questions about that, please ask me in class or somebody else probably has the same question, or shoot me an email. Very good question. But yeah, Thunder is your main textbook. And then sometimes you'll see a BB, and that just means there's an additional reading posted on Blackboard. And typically those are the not just old white guys one. Bring in a little diversity. Good question. Other questions? Awesome. Well, I'm hoping that y'all are excited about this class. I know I am. This is a fun class to teach. I do have to say, when we get into the theory, sometimes it feels very, and this is a weird word to use intellectually, but chewy, right? It can take a while to like digest some of the theory stuff. The second time ever I taught this class, I made it a 2 times a week class instead of a 3 times a week class. And people just like could not sustain attention. Like you need more time to digest it. And that's why I teach this class 3 times a week, so that we have smaller chunks. You have a couple days in between to process, right? And it's tended to work well, although it does mean we have to have class on Fridays, so. Alrighty, I'm gonna do a couple quick things here. I'm gonna hide the captions here and use the ones on Google just because then they don't block the PowerPoint. And I'm forever gonna call them PowerPoints even when it's like Google Slides. I guess in the business world, they call them slide decks. Maybe I should start using that. It's very fancy. Alrighty. So today we're just gonna start talking about like what the heck is personality and how are we going to explore the question of what is personality in this particular class. And I apologize, you'll see me checking my watch more often than I would in a typical class, but the clock at the back of the class is like completely wrong. So sometimes this clock gets hidden when I'm in things. And so for that reason, I just want to make sure I don't let you out late. Basically, it's Friday, y'all got things to do. Alrighty, I just need to basically put in a work order to get them to fix the clock. Probably needs batteries. Alrighty, so how do we define personality? Some of you may have guessed the reason that I had you all fill out that questionnaire at the end of class on Wednesday is I was going to use some of your examples for this lecture. And you all had great definitions. I thought that you were already really thinking about this in a psychological and a comprehensive way. And so these are just a sampling, but a lot of these sounded like these or were just as good. I just can only fit something on one slide. So what's personality? What makes someone who they are, the way they act, talk, and interact with people. I really like this one. I don't think I've ever had anyone write it quite this way. I feel like personality is ultimately the current outcome of our previous experiences. That's just such a cool way to conceptualize it. The unique makeup of certain traits held by an individual. This is really good. A couple of people talked about traits. Actually, probably like half the class now that I think about it. And one of the things we'll talk about at several points during the semester is like, are there personality traits? What is a personality trait? Things along those lines. I would describe personality as a person's emotional characteristics that shapes how they perceive the world and others. Yeah, this is a big part of it, right? And how you express yourself and interact with others. And I really liked this part. This is subjective to when you do not know someone versus your best friend. This is something we're going to talk about throughout the semester. So one of the tenets of personality we'll talk about today is that a lot of people believe personality is the fancy word immutable, which basically just means it's not going to change. No matter what situation you're in throughout your life, it's not going to change. But it does change in some ways, right? We are completely different with someone we know and trust really well, right? Versus someone that we maybe just met, right? And so how do these things manifest in different ways, but maybe have the same underlying thing, or maybe just personality traits are not a thing? We'll read some people who say that. So how do we define personality, right? Well, how do we define any word? This sounds, again, like very abstract and very philosophical, but words have different meanings depending on different contexts, right? So let me throw this to you all. What is a bird? How would you all define a bird? You could just shout stuff out.
An animal with feathers.
With feathers, okay, yeah.
It flies.
It flies. Although what about a penguin, Bernie? Right? I mean, there's always weird ones. Other things that we think about, we think of birds. Beaks, yeah, they have beaks. Okay. I watched a video yesterday where someone was like doing a photo shoot with a parrot. He's holding it out like this. He's like, "Can I bring it closer to me?" And the trainer was like, "I would not recommend it." What else do birds have? Wings. Okay. So somebody brought this up when you've seen this example before, and the person who was using this question said, "Oh, okay, so then are maxi pads birds?" Maxi pads have wings, right? So what is the essence of birdidity? And what's the point of trying to even define something? Again, this is where we all go like, what? But I thought it was just in a psych class and we're gonna like learn some facts, right? This is a little more philosophical, a little more abstract. So a brief aside, the maxi pad joke is attributed to Dr. Michael Levine, who was one of my informal advisors and a professor for several classes for me as an undergraduate. He remains a mentor to me. Just one of the most brilliant minds I've ever had the chance to interact with. He taught my theories of personality class when I was an undergraduate. He doesn't know how to be retired. He's still one of the leading researchers and theorists in the area of eating disorders, particularly prevention and developmental issues. And he just had like the best sense of humor. So you'll see me tell some Michael Levine stories throughout this class. And I wanted you all to know who he was. Ben Newberry taught me this class when I was a graduate student. Really interesting for me to see like the level of intricacy you get into in a grad class versus an undergrad class. I'm going to keep you all at the undergrad level. He also taught me how to teach. He taught my teaching of psychology course, and he just gave lots of really good nuggets of wisdom. He also had some great jokes and things I will do throughout the semester when we get to talking about Freud. I have an impression of the id that is entirely attributable to Ben Newberry. So I always believe in citing your sources. These are big influences on me for how I teach this class. So what we're going to find throughout the semester is how we define personality depends on who we're asking. Okay, so Freud, for example, would argue that personality is largely unconscious. It's hidden, it's unknown to people. Skinner, B.F. Skinner, a behaviorist, he studied pigeons and rats. He would say that it's an unnecessary construct. Skinner believed the mind was a black box. Did not matter what happened in the mind. It was just stimulus in, response out. Even modern behaviorists wouldn't necessarily agree with Skinner. Just like even modern psychoanalytic or psychodynamic thinkers wouldn't necessarily agree with Freud now. Allport talks about it being something real within an individual that leads to characteristic behavior and thought. Allport is among like the trait theorists that we'll talk about this semester. So he thinks traits are real, they exist, and they influence how we human, basically. The word itself comes from the Greek, and persona means mask. So there's this idea that like, is personality who we really are, or is it a show we put on for other people? And then you've got Funder, your textbook author. And his definition is a lot like y'all's, actually. So he says an individual's characteristics, patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior, together with the psychological mechanisms, which might be hidden, might not be, behind those patterns. So again, this idea that it's very individualistic, right? It is influenced by a host of things, and we can see it evidenced in a host of ways. How someone talks, how someone acts, right? How someone is thinking and feeling, particularly in response to specific situations. Okay, so this class is called Theories of Personality. So now we need to figure out what is a theory and who cares, right? Why is this class not just called personality? Why do we gotta throw theory in there? Well, theory in and of itself is a scientific enterprise, right? So theory is something that we are going to try to find research support for. It's a conjecture, not just for conjecture's sake, but for the purpose of trying to explain the world. So this is very different than our everyday use of the word, right? So if someone says, oh, I got a theory about that when you're talking at lunch, what do they usually mean?
Yeah, it's trying to do when like unknown, there's not really evidence behind it, like they're on something.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, I'm the first one to come up with this, right? Yeah. A lot of times when we say theory in everyday, we kind of mean like I have a wild conjecture sometimes, right? Whereas a theory in science means a clear idea that we're using to drive research. And oftentimes a theory does have a lot of research support behind it. I know a lot of you, maybe not a lot, but like maybe a quarter of y'all put down your favorite class was evolutionary psych, and you took with Dr. Murdoch, which is awesome. I texted her that this morning, hopefully it'll like make her day, right? And one of the things that you talk about in evolutionary psych is that the theory of evolution is not wild conjecture, right? It is something with going on 200 years of research behind it, right? And we're like finding new evidence of it every day. Like my daughter gets the Kids National Geographic magazine, and like the cover this month is like new dinosaur found. We're always finding new dinosaurs, right? Theories are based on this idea called constructs, and this is a word we're going to throw around a lot in this class. And a construct is basically a concept. It's an idea, it's a thing we can define, right? So a construct can be as abstract as depression. Or it can be as specific as, like cognitive reaction to something. And so psychologists love to use the word construct. And like that throws people off sometimes. And it's just, think of it as a concept, an idea, a thing in thought. You'll often see stuff in psychology that reads like this. Psychologists, for some reason, it's not all psychologists, but certain psychologists love to try to make it sound like they're smarter, or maybe think that like psych is more grounded and has more support if they use a lot of really big words and describe things in really complicated things. So Pervin describes a theory as a set of assumptions and explanatory concepts that tie together various empirical findings and suggest new relationships among them that should obtain under certain defined circumstances. Right? I mean, this is accurate, but it's also like, I don't know about you guys, when I read something like that, sometimes I hear like Charlie Brown's teacher. I don't know if you've ever watched Charlie Brown, but the teachers and all the adults, they just hear them like, wah, 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 right? There is a great type of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a modern therapy that works really well. My graduate advisor, who's one of the smartest people I've ever met, told me it took her forever to get through the first chapter because it's all written like this, only worse, right? It's like, why not make it approachable? I wrote a chapter a few years back, and I remember the editor, which was actually Michael Levine, reaching back out to me, and he's like, so I'm not sure you did this because you're like at the same page length as everybody else, but you use a lot more words. And I was like, yeah, because I'm not using like 14-letter words every time I'm writing a word, right? So we cut it a little. And then one of the things that we're going to talk about in this class is how do we evaluate theories? How do we decide whether a theory is a good theory or not? Whether we should use that theory to guide our research or our questioning or our interpretation of someone in front of us. So Maddie, who was an existential psychologist, described two overall approaches to personality theories within the field of psychology. And I would say this is true of like any theory within psychology, not just personality theories. So one is benevolent eclecticism. There's a lot of us who are like, this theory has some good ideas and that theory has some good ideas, and maybe we can kind of like mix those all together and that gives us the best description. But then you have the people who are partisan zealots, who are like, I believe Freud and nobody else, and you're wrong. Right? Again, even though ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, is a great therapy grounded in a really interesting theory, I'm a little off put from it sometimes because I saw the person who founded it at a conference once, and they were on a panel of people from 3 different types of therapy, 3 different theoretical orientations. And the other 2 people kept on saying, all 3 of these therapies have great research support, show that they actually help people. And this guy was just like, no, ACT is better. Partisan zealotry, right? And again, I could understand if you're the person who came up with something, right? But like in some ways, does that help the field? Does that help us advance if we shut down that debate? Ben Newberry talks about malevolent eclecticism, which is the idea that sometimes we're jamming things together in ways that don't work or might justify our interpretations that are not only inaccurate, but sometimes harmful, right? And so we have to be careful of the eclecticism that we are using the best of science and not just picking stuff because we like it, whether or not it's actually going to be helpful to people. So what makes a theory a good theory? And here's the same Pervin of the complicated definition guide. But his ways of testing a theory, I think, are really nice to look at. So he talked about parsimony. So parsimony is a fancy word for simplicity. Usually a parsimonious explanation for something is the simplest explanation. And the idea is that typically the simplest explanation for something that's not overly complicated is the best. That almost seems in contrast to the second one, although they can go together. But comprehensiveness. So you gotta keep it really simple, but also explain everything. Right? That's easy. So comprehensiveness is, okay, if we're gonna explain personality, you have to explain all the different facets of it, right? And for some theorists we'll talk about, it was really comprehensive. One of the things that I respect about Freud is Freud was very comprehensive. He explained development, he explained relationships, he explained psychopathology, he explained therapy, right? He even had a theory about neurons. Other theories we'll talk about really focus in on like one or two things. Syntax is the way that you think about things being related to each other, right? So can we situate this theory in the way that people actually interact, or traits tend to go together? Semantics is the ease with which we can take these really abstract concepts and ideas and translate them into behaviors we can observe. Sometimes you'll hear this called an operational definition. Again, really fancy term for like, can we actually describe something, right? And again, a lot of times in psychology, we're looking for observable behavior. Is there something we can just watch someone? Is there something we can have someone document themselves, right? What are they actually doing? Falsifiability is a huge one if we're situating this within a scientific concept. And this essentially means, can the theory be tested? And hypothetically, can it be proven wrong? If you don't have a theory that can be tested, people will debate whether it's scientific, right? And this is going to be a problem with some of the theories we look at this semester. One of the articles you'll read even argues that we shouldn't be testing particular theories. But if we want psychology to be a science, right, we need to be able to actually test things. One important like side note here is that you'll often hear people use the word like prove, right? And the awkward thing within science, and this is not just psychology, is that in truth, true pure scientists believe we can never actually fully prove something. We can find a lot of evidence to support it. And often you'll see the phrase used, we failed to disprove it. But the idea is there could always be that next study that comes out and says, ooh, I don't know about this, right? And so you kind of have to always keep in mind, it could be falsifiable. It could be proven wrong. Empirical validity. So we'll discuss this more when we talk about research, but basically this is the theory applicable? Can I take this theory and actually apply it to people's everyday lives? Or is it so abstract that it's maybe not helpful? Again, related to that utility, is it actually useful? Is it something we can use to apply it to a therapy? A way of helping kids in school, right? Things along those lines. So this is just one idea of what makes a good theory. In your book, Funder has his laws. And Funder's first law is introduced in your first chapter. And this is something really important to keep in mind. And this is something that doesn't only apply to theories, it applies to a lot of things in academia. A theory's greatest strength is usually also its greatest weakness. So a theory's greatest strength is also usually its greatest weakness. Right, so something that might make this seem really awesome can also maybe be not so great. Give an example. We're going to talk later in the semester about learning theories and how those have evolved, and one of them now is cognitive behavioral theory, which has led to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very effective, very manualized. And for that reason, some clients feel like it's gaslighting, or that it is just not taking their feelings into account. Greatest strength, also its greatest weakness. So Newbery also, Ben Newbery just likes to come up with his own stuff. He should have written a book. But he also had his own way of saying what might be a good theory. The first is formal clarity. It needs to be written unambiguously. We need to actually be able to tell what that theory is saying, right? So again, some of the theorists not great on this. It also has to have successful post-diction. And what Newbery meant by this is that it has to take into account what we already know. You can't ignore data that already exists, right? We know that humans are social creatures, for example. We tend to do really well in groups and like to socialize. If we disregarded that and came up with a theory that only focused on an individual in a vacuum, it's not a good theory. And then we're going to follow the scientific method. And again, as we talk about research next week, we'll talk about this more. But we're going to start with our symbolic theory. Again, these really abstract ideas about how things might interact and how this part of your brain or your mind or your soul might influence that. From that theory, we're going to come up with one idea for how we can test this. And that will help us form our hypothesis. This is what I think I will find when I do this. A hypothesis is just a prediction. Then we're going to have some sort of procedures or a method for testing that hypothesis, right? Are we going to hypnotize people? Are we going to have them fill out surveys? Are we going to put them in an experimental situation where they have to interact with other people and see what they do, right? That's going to be different, depending, honestly, on the hypothesis you're asking. And then we're going to get some data. And we're going to say, does that data support our hypothesis? If it does, awesome, publish it, right? Let the world know. If it doesn't, we might need to go back up and redesign our hypothesis. If we do this enough and our hypothesis, no matter how many hypotheses based off this theory are just not working, we might need to go back up and redesign the whole theory. And that's part of the scientific method. And again, this is the seeds of its own destruction, the falsifiability part, right? Is that you've got to be able to actually test it. So as I just mentioned, a theory is never proven. The most you can say is that the data is supporting it or fail to disprove it. Theories can be disproven or disconfirmed. And basically this whole idea relates back to Funder's first law. A theory should have within it the seeds of its own destruction. If there's no way to disconfirm it, in some ways it's meaningless. If it's not falsifiable, if it's not refutable, it's not science. And psychology is a science. I was just talking with my intro class about the start of psychology back in 1879. You had a philosopher who set up a psychology lab and said, I want to apply physiology to philosophical questions, right? It's science. Then you have parsimony, simplicity. This is a goal, but Newbery himself fully admitted psychological theories rarely reach or even approach parsimony. They tend to be pretty complex. So why do we even need theories? Why can't we just like skip through life and be like, I have a personality and that's all that matters, right? Well, you can, right? But we want to do science. So Levine argued that theories are important for these reasons. They're simplifying. They help us reduce complexity. They help us take a lot of complex information and begin to understand it in a more simple way. Perhaps most importantly, they're explanatory. They explain the things we observe. And again, especially for things like personality, it's going to explain why we do things, why the people around us do things, right? And humans have this real drive to know why the heck people are doing what they're doing, right? What is wrong with that person? Or what is right with that person? Predictive, right? Theories can help us generate new hypotheses, new relationships between concepts or between people. And then heuristic. They're going to stimulate curiosity. They're going to stimulate investigation. They're going to stimulate science. Newberry, pretty similar in a lot of ways. He said that theories summarize. So they simplify, they summarize. You could take a room full of data and summarize it with one statement, with a good theory. And then predictions. The ability of a theory to make good predictions can have profound consequences, even for things we haven't yet observed or studied, right? If a theory is good, you should be able to apply it to new things. When we get fully autonomous AI robots, right? And we take our theories of personality and apply them to those robots. Exciting, but also a little scary, right? Fully acknowledge. If you see movies like Ex Machina or iRobot, right? And then a sense of closure. Like you feel like you understand things when you read a theory. A theory can just be an explanation. So the goals of science really are to predict, control, and explain natural phenomena. So predict, control, and explain natural phenomena. And this again becomes especially important when you're working in applied settings in psychology, right? So like a lot of people, when they think psychology, they think helping people, right? Which is not wrong. Like the whole field of psychology is about how do we make people's lives better, to be honest. So if you're working with a client as a therapist, or you're working with a company as an industrial organizational psychologist, you're working at a nonprofit, you're working with kids in a school setting or an after school program, you want to be able to scientifically help them even more. And so the sense of closure can be a really important piece of how can we take what we've theorized, what we know from going through the scientific method, and then apply it and help people, right? People often make fun of, this idea that like high schoolers or even folks your age, when you say, oh, why you're interested in psychology, people be like, I want to help people. And there are certain cynical people who will make fun of people who say that. And I say, F you, right? Because that is what psychology is about. It's about helping people. And you could do that very abstractly through theorizing you're doing science, or you could do it every day in an applied setting, right? One of the things that comes out of this is that we are all theorists in our own way. As I mentioned, people have this natural inclination or drive to figure things out and to figure other people out and to assess people and get to know each other. So just a warning, if you all have not run into this already, when you tell people you're studying psychology, they'll be like, ooh, are you analyzing me? Right? Like when you're an undergrad, sometimes you're like, no, I don't have the knowledge yet. Right? But as a grad student, I'd just be like, I'm off the clock. But people, because they do it in their own way, just assume that once you have more knowledge, you're just always doing it, you can't turn it off. And there are certainly times where that happens. Early in my relationship with my husband, because we got together about 6 months before I started grad school, I had to learn to turn the therapist brain off because he'd be like, you are therapizing me and that is not helpful right now. And I'd be like, accurate, I'm sorry, right? But there are times that once you've learned that barrier, you can separate it. People are gonna look for non-random regularities in attitudes and behaviors. And one of the things, in about a week, I think, or so, when we do our first discussion day, you're gonna do a reading, particularly about judging other people from maybe a little bit of information, right? We all do it. And sometimes we can be spot on, and sometimes it can be to the person's detriment, right? People can come up with their own theories about why other people act the way they do, but also about how they come to be that way, right? And that becomes a really important part of the theories we'll study is, okay, this person is this way. I have a theory about them being this way. Why? Why are they this way? You know, in the past, it used to be, oh, their mom didn't love them enough, right? That was like everybody's blame it on the moms. And now it's a lot more nuanced. And something you've probably heard about in your other psych classes is the fundamental attribution error. And this is the belief that our own errors are situational, but that other people's errors are part of their personality. The simplest explanation I usually, or example of this I usually give is, let's say I'm walking out of class and I trip it, right? I'll be like, who put that chair there? Right? But maybe if I see someone else walking out of class and they trip, I'm like, what a clumsy person. I will not actually do this, I promise, because I'm probably the clumsiest person in this room. Dr. Slipka and I had a great conversation last night about if we tried to like remove or kick over a sign, we would probably just injure ourselves and then get arrested, right? Like it would just not work out, and accurate. But we do this for other things too, right? I'm crying because I had a really bad day. That person's crying because they're weepy, right? And so this is something we need to kind of like fight against in our everyday lives, but also as we look at these theories throughout the semester. Human beings are prone to jump or maybe even leap to conclusions and assume that behavior reflects on people's personalities. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it does not, right? Sometimes people are just having a really crummy day. In actuality, personality is really the result of the interaction between the person and the situation they are in, right? Those two things interact. In fact, I had a textbook when I was in grad school just called The Person and the Situation. The idea is that by seeing people across different settings or contexts, we get a better idea about their personality. In fact, I'll give you an example of this. So there are personality disorders that are listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Because these are underlying, might vary in situations, we as graduate students were not allowed to diagnose someone with a personality disorder until we had seen them 3 times. Unfortunately, if you take health insurance as a therapist, you have to have a diagnosis by the end of the first intake session. Otherwise, the insurance won't pay, right? So like our systems can work against the science. One of my favorite examples of this, right, is that if you acted the same way in class as you did at a party, or vice versa, right, people might look at you really weird. Right, so if you came into class on Monday and you started dancing on the desk, like, whoop, the music, and there's no music, right, we'd all be like, the health center's right over there, can we walk you over, right? Same thing, let's say you went to a party this weekend and you sat down, and you got out a notebook and you started raising your hand, right? People again would be like, are you okay? Do you need a drink? Okay, just help you relax. So even if you are the same person in various situations, that doesn't mean you're gonna act identically. And obviously this is a silly example, but it is something that I think we don't give ourselves or other people the benefit of the doubt about enough. One of the things it makes me think of is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, one of the things the Hulk says is, they're like, oh, you need to get angry, and he says, I'm always angry, right? He's just learned to control that anger, and they kind of played with this when they did the She-Hulk show. And he's like, you gotta learn to control your anger, and she's like, I'm a woman, I have to deal with anger all the time, right? There are things we have within us at all times, and they will just come out depending on the situation. Alrighty, with that, we will end a few minutes early today. Everybody enjoy your weekend. And next week we'll start talking about research and how we study. If anyone does need a copy of the syllabus, I've got that. Like Gabrielle, I'll give you one of these. I think we go get it up to my board too. Yeah, so within the next couple of weeks, if you wanna like meet with me and talk about that, I think you're. Oh, perfect. Yeah, I knew I had some people on for today, so that's great.